you don't follow sports a lot, but
Right.
and I don't really follow Stephen A. Smith. Right? I'm trying to use him as an example right now. And Stephen A. Smith is a terrific example of what I'm talking about. Like,
All right.
he went the Democrat route. He's heavy on the black first and I'm good with all of that. That's fine. But after Trump won, now he's starting to identify all of the things that the Democrats have done badly and poorly, right? And so people were like, "Oh man, I'm so glad that you're waking up," and and in my mind, I'm thinking like, and this is why I relate this type of mentality to the business person, because they're like, everyone is okay with this now. I understood it the whole time, but I wasn't going to say it because people weren't on board with it. But now that it seems like the majority are on board with it, now I can state this side very clearly. So it's not, to me, that it's not like you don't have any actual individual personal views. You can just spew the objective view. You can spew what you think the overwhelming majority is. And I guess to kind of like put a cap on that, this is like a paragraph that I wrote. So more or less, I was just talking about the differences between the rational extrovert and the rational introvert. So I say this fundamental difference ties the rational extrovert to what society collectively deems as good or true, as it hinders their capacity to remain faithful to their own subjective reasoning. Thus, at best, the rational extrovert can only provide a rational conclusion based on the logic or subjective feelings of others, while the irrational character of their perception never sees things as black and white. The rational introvert, however, does not operate in this way because their rational process works to bring everything in their perception into accordance with reason. Therefore, by staying true to the subjective nature of reason throughout the complete cognitive process, they can apply logic properly. That's all.
That's fair. And that's the benefit of having that introverted piece or subjective piece. You get to have that constant standard. The rational extrovert, when they're in the most extreme portion of extroversion and they're using extroversion as their guide, they certainly can follow the consensus, certainly. And so that's why it's so important to have an introverted thinking function, introverted judging function to be able to keep that in check. So when the rational extroverts can identify some sort of moral standard or some sort of rational standard to hold to, that is a huge help in their lives. So it's great to see them when they choose to do that.
But yes, it's just so interesting to me that there are people who can articulate a point, because the stuff that Stephen A. is saying is very articulate. To me, he actually can explain what a lot of people are thinking and feeling, because he's really challenging Democrats right now. And I'm like, so this shows me that you already knew that a farce was happening. Like, you already knew, but you were on board with it because you were just on board with it. Now, that could be because you have specific moral judgments about Trump or whatever, but you weren't saying this before.
I weren't saying it before. That's true. Things have changed.
And so, but to me, once again, like, there are many people, and I've seen this many times, where people only really feel comfortable saying certain things because other people will now be accepting of what they're saying. And they're saying it like, oh yeah, this is just obvious. No, you're just comfortable with saying what was obvious to some people now because it's popular.
There you go. So it's like, from a psychological perspective, their objective mind did kind of have like a blind spot for all those things that were happening there. And you think it happens even a blind spot even for checking themselves?
Man, I don't think it's about checking themselves. This is what to me Young gives me. He's saying like these people don't have, their relationship to their ego is not as strong as the introvert. For the introvert, his relationship to his ego is so strong that he identifies the ego as the self. Whereas though the extrovert just says, oh, it's just all a part of life, and just is kind of like, hey, I don't have to adhere to one thing. And I just think it's more important to introverts. Just more important to be consistent to introverts.
Certainly very important. That's the truth. And it definitely, introversion certainly aids in introspection. which allows you to be very self-aware. So I always found that humorous. When like, you need to take some time and self-reflect. Just think about thinking. I'm like, oh, I do that. Yeah, that's not going to be like when people say you need to spend time in self-reflection and just meditate. Just think about what your thoughts. Just take stock of who you are and what you're thinking about. I'm like, yeah, that's what I do all the time. All right, yes,
Right.
sure. You didn't have to tell me that. That wasn't news. Me, it's just
But that's news. That's for somebody who isn't doing, like you said, like somebody who finds it tough to introspect, finds it tough to, reflect. And it's almost like it's with the assumption that, oh, we all have this issue. Some of us might do it too much. Some of us might.
like, I think you're projecting, which lets me know where you stand. Thank you. There's other ways to communicate that, and you could have told a story and not made so many assumptions about people. Oh wow!
Something that you had just said that just made me think. This is kind of an example. So it's a lot that Jung says before this. He's just talking about thinking and when it gets taken over by another function. I'll just say that. So once it gets taken over by another function, or is lodged in another function, thinking no longer progresses. It stagnates. And he says judgment takes on a distinct quality of inheritance. And so it's more or less saying that thinking, when you lodge it with, like when it's not the first function, but he's talking about extroverted thinkers. And he's talking about like when you let another function drive your thinking process. But at its core, like extroverted thinking is already concretistic. It's already, extroverted is already either ideal or conscious. Yeah, they can't necessarily, it's already lodged together with another function in a sense. So he says, judgment takes on a distinct quality of inheritance. It confines itself entirely to the range of the given material, nowhere overstepping it. It is satisfied with more or less abstract statements which do not impart any value to the material that is not already inherent in it. Such judgments are always oriented to the object, and they affirm nothing more about an experience than its objective and intrinsic meaning. We may easily observe this type of thinking in people who cannot refrain from tacking on to another impression or experience some rational and doubtless very valid remark, which in no way ventures beyond the charmed circle of the objective datum. At bottom, a remark merely says, I have understood it because afterwards I can think it. And there the matter ends. At best, such a judgment amounts to no more than putting the experience in an objective setting where it quite obviously belonged in the first place. So to me, with that, it's just that I guess when I bring that up, I probably should have stopped in the middle. It just doesn't overstep. It doesn't do anything that's not asked of it. It doesn't.
Yes, it just works with it.
Yeah.
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, if you're an FI dominant person, then I guess TE is probably your fourth function. So
Yeah.
if you're going to use that then, it's not doing a whole lot anyway. But whatever it is doing it in service of the morality, internal judgment focus. Yeah.
Right.
Of value purpose.
Right. It says it's never going to go beyond what its expectations.